A year ago, the world was struck by a terrifying event. A supermoon caused over 1 billion people globally to turn into werewolves when exposed to its light. Now, another supermoon is coming, and people are terrified of what might happen again. In a TV interview, Dr. James Aranda, a scientist who was part of the team that studied the event, talks about the disaster. He doesn't explain why it happened, but urges everyone to stay indoors during the supermoon. He reassures the public that they're working hard on a solution and promises that humanity will survive the night, a night of terror. Meanwhile, Wesley Marshall, a former soldier and molecular biologist, is getting ready for the night at his house. His niece Emma and sister-in-law Lucy are with him. Lucy's husband didn't survive the last supermoon, and Wesley is determined to protect his family this time. He's been barricading the house, setting traps and securing the entire property. The fence is electrified and there's an external monitoring system in place to keep watch for any signs of danger. His neighbors are just as scared, preparing for the chaos that is about to unfold. Reagan, one of the neighbors, knocks on Wesley's door to leave some candy for Emma. Before she leaves, Lucy gives Reagan a few useful items for the night and asks her to be careful. Wesley then heads over to his neighbor Cody's house. He's concerned because Cody is irresponsibly shooting his gun outside, practicing for the night. Cody brushes it off, saying it will be every man for himself soon enough. Wesley warns him to be careful, especially with children in the neighborhood, but Cody doesn't listen. Back at his own house, Wesley checks on Lucy and Emma, making sure everything is locked up tight. He reminds them of the survival rules. Don't open the door for anyone, don't make any noise, and don't draw attention. He tells Lucy that if she has to, she should shoot to protect herself or Emma. Wesley shares an emotional goodbye with Emma, explaining that he has to leave, but promises that nothing will get past him to harm them. Lucy understands but urges him to go. The scientists need him. He hesitates, but then heads out. As night falls, the streets are in chaos. People are scrambling to get to safety. Dr. James Aranda holds a press conference with other scientists and military leaders, explaining that they've developed a serum that can block the effects of the supermoon's light on human DNA. The serum is the key to surviving the night, and they need to test it. Wesley, now part of the team, is essential in helping to find a permanent solution. In a testing facility, volunteers are prepared to test the serum by being exposed to moonlight. Miles, the husband of scientist Amy, is one of the test subjects. He's chained up in a large cage along with 3 other volunteers, a woman and 2 men. The roof of the testing facility opens, revealing the full power of the supermoon in the sky. As the light pours in, none of the volunteers transform, showing that the serum is working. The scientists are thrilled and prepare to move on to the next phase. Meanwhile, back at Lucy's house, she, Emma, and Cody are on edge. The lights flicker, and Lucy watches the monitors, but she doesn't see anything unusual. However, Reagan, back at her own house, starts to get scared. She calls for her mom, but there's no answer. Suddenly, she hears something strange, and fear creeps over her. At the testing facility, Dr. James and Wesley, along with other scientists, are watching the test subjects. Wesley explains that the mutation caused by the supermoon seems to be a kind of defense mechanism, but they still don't understand why it's only happening now. As they discuss the details, something goes terribly wrong. Miles begins to feel strange, and his body starts to change. Before they can act, he fully transforms into a werewolf and begins to break free from his restraints, like Wolverine on crack. In the chaos, he grabs the serum machine, throwing it away and causing the system to malfunction. The other volunteers start to change too. The scientists panic as the cages holding the werewolves are unlocked, and the creatures begin to attack. In the confusion, Amy tries to escape but runs into Wesley, who is helping an injured scientist. The two hear a roar from down the hall and quickly change direction, finding safety in a locked room. The werewolves follow them, but they manage to escape. Meanwhile, back at Lucy's house, she watches the werewolves moving on the cameras. Cody, who is still on high alert outside, shoots at one of them on a tree, but then a freezer crashes through his window, knocking him down. He's exposed to the moonlight and begins to transform. Wesley and Amy are making their way through the chaos, avoiding the werewolves as they try to reach safety. They find a room and prepare to use the serum, knowing it will only work for about an hour. Wesley sets a timer so they don't waste any time. He tells Amy that if one of them starts to transform, the other must leave and keep going alone. They can't stay in the facility or they'll risk becoming like the others. As Wesley, Amy, and the others flee, they encounter Miles, who has been transformed into a werewolf. Amy, determined not to let Wesley shoot, fires at a gas container instead, creating a huge blast that stuns the werewolf long enough for them to escape. They quickly jump into a car and speed away, but Wesley's mind is focused on one thing: getting to Lucy's house. On the way, he calls Lucy, trying to make sure she's safe. She answers, sounding shaken, telling him she saw a werewolf break into Cody's house. Then suddenly, she hears a voice outside. It's Reagan, her neighbor, screaming for help, covered in a tarp. To Lucy's horror, Reagan hasn't transformed yet. Lucy wants to help, but knows doing so could be deadly. Wesley, hearing the panic in Lucy's voice, shouts at her not to open the door to anyone, reminding her of the rules they've been following to stay safe. But Lucy can't just let her neighbors suffer. In desperation, she tells Reagan to stay calm and promises to help her. But before Lucy can act, a werewolf leaps at Reagan and drags her away. Lucy and her daughter Emma are horrified, not just by what's happening outside, but because they can no longer reach Wesley. The roars of the werewolves grow louder, and fear grips them as the minutes pass without any word from him. Meanwhile, Wesley and Amy are in trouble of their own. They crash their car while trying to avoid the werewolves. Although they survive the collision, they must escape on foot. They make their way cautiously, trying not to attract the attention of any nearby creatures. But it's too late. Another werewolf attacks them. In the chaos, the werewolf, Cody, grabs Reagan's lifeless body and throws it at the electric fence surrounding Lucy's house, hoping to disable it. Lucy, still terrified for her daughter's safety, sees Cody near the fence and quickly reacts, spraying pepper spray into the werewolf's face. The creature howls in pain, backing away momentarily. Wesley and Amy continue their journey, but their path is blocked by a group of werewolves attacking another car. With no other choice, they sneak past, staying low and quiet behind the cars. One of the werewolves begins sniffing the air nearby, and the two hold their breath, praying they won't be found. The werewolf moves closer, its claws scraping the pavement, but thankfully, it doesn't spot them. When the werewolf finally leaves, Wesley and Amy breathe a sigh of relief. But their relief is short-lived when the sound of a ticking clock reminds them that an hour has passed, and the serum keeping the werewolves at bay is starting to wear off. Panic sets in. The werewolves are still around and the clock is ticking. They run as fast as they can, but the werewolves soon give chase. They spot a supermarket with its gate closing and race towards it. A boy inside quickly opens the gate for them and urges them to follow him. Inside, they are confronted by a group of people holding Amy at knife point. Wesley tries to explain that they're working on a cure, but the masked man leading the group isn't convinced. He says there's no cure, and demands to know why they shouldn't just throw them back outside to face the werewolves. Wesley, desperate, explains that all he wants is to get to his family, and he needs to use the tunnel underneath the building to do so. The masked man agrees to take them to the entrance, but warns them that once they're inside, they'll be on their own. Meanwhile, back at Lucy's house, she watches the remaining cameras on the security system. She notices that the werewolves are organizing, perhaps preparing for something bigger. She knows she must stay alert if they are to survive the night. Wesley and Amy make it to the tunnel entrance, but their path is blocked by a locked gate. Wesley gets ready to shoot it open, but just as he's about to act, one of the werewolves appears behind them, launching an attack. They barely have time to react as the werewolf knocks them both to the ground and breaks through the gate ahead. Amy faints from the impact, and Wesley struggles to get back on his feet only to be thrown away by the werewolf's powerful strike. The werewolf lunges at him, but Wesley grabs a nearby iron bar and stabs the creature with it. The werewolf lets out a blood-curdling scream and quickly dies. Amy wakes up, groggy but determined, and helps Wesley to his feet. Together they continue forward, desperate to make it to safety. When they reach the street, they have no choice but to stop. The supermoon is rising, and they know the light will affect them if they're not careful. They cover themselves with tarps to shield their skin and keep moving. They find a nearby store to hide in, but as soon as they enter, an alarm blares. They panic, quickly turning it off, knowing the noise will attract the attention of the werewolves. Inside, they find a freezer and use it to cool down another dose of serum they have for each of them. While they wait, Wesley opens up to Amy. He confesses that for most of his life, he's been on missions across the world and never had the time or desire to start a family. But after his brother's death, something changed. Now he's terrified of failing to protect his new family. Amy, understanding the weight of his words, comforts him. She tells him that he's doing his best, and that's all anyone can ask for. The serum had reached the perfect temperature, and Amy rushed off to find something to keep it cold for their journey. As Wesley kept watch, he heard a strange noise. He moved to investigate and found a young woman with her back to him, eating something. When he called out to her asking how she'd gotten in, she turned around. Wesley froze as he saw her semi-transformed state. Her face was twisted in a monstrous way, and she was tearing into a cat. Meow, meow! Wesley, hesitant to shoot, warned her to stay away, but she advanced toward him. And just as things were about to escalate, Amy arrived with a quick solution. She teased the woman with a stun weapon, knocking her unconscious. Meanwhile, outside Lucy's house, the werewolves, following Cody's orders, were attacking the electric fence. They slammed into it, causing the lights to flicker. Lucy, preparing for the worst, grabbed her shotgun and watched the security cameras. One of the creatures managed to push a post into the fence, bringing the whole system down. The house plunged into darkness. Now, with only barricaded doors to protect them, Lucy and her daughter, Emma, knew they were in a race against time. Some werewolves were already trying to break through the windows and doors. Lucy set up emergency lights, and she and Emma made their way to the living room to hold off the attackers. One werewolf tried to crawl across the ceiling, but got caught in one of Wesley's traps, buying them a little more time. Wesley and Amy, now carrying the serum, were on their way to Lucy's house. As they drove through the streets, they spotted a group of well-dressed, armed people fighting off a pack of werewolves. Wesley saw it as a way to get to Lucy faster. The armed group managed to push back the werewolves, but as Wesley and Amy approached, they were met with gunfire. The group, not trusting them, began shooting, even as Wesley pleaded that they were protected by the serum. Just as they were being fired at, a werewolf attacked one of the armed men, starting a new chaos-filled shootout. Wesley and Amy took cover, trying to protect themselves from the crossfire and the growing number of werewolves. Soon, the armed men were overwhelmed, realizing the werewolves were closing in. Amy, desperate to help, had an idea. She offered to act as bait, knowing it was the only way for Wesley to escape and reach Lucy. Reluctantly, Wesley agreed, but asked her not to die. Amy stood in the middle of the street, letting the werewolves notice her. One, a massive beast, approached and sniffed her. It gave her a slight push, and Amy, trying to assert dominance, let out a powerful scream. The werewolf roared back, and just as it seemed like Amy might be done for, Wesley opened fire from a nearby car. The werewolves scattered, but one managed to grab Amy before she could get back to the car. Panicking, Wesley drove off, needing to get to Lucy. Meanwhile, Lucy was running low on ammo as the werewolves continued to break through her house. She and Emma had managed to hold them off with whatever they could find: knives, pepper spray, and sheer will. But the creatures were relentless, and more kept coming. Lucy quickly realized their only hope was to hold out until dawn. Just as a werewolf broke through the wall, Lucy hid Emma in a wardrobe and prepared to fight. The creature, focused on Emma, was about to attack when Lucy ambushed it, but the werewolf overpowered her, throwing her aside. Emma, in a panic, grabbed a knife and struck the werewolf, but just as it seemed like she might be next, Lucy found an axe. With one powerful swing, she killed the creature. Wesley, meanwhile, was racing to the house. When he arrived, he saw that Lucy and Emma were still alive, but they were running out of time. Cody, the leader of the werewolves, had freed himself from the wrecked car and was coming for them. Wesley had no choice but to confront him. With no bullets left, and knowing he had no other option, Wesley decided to transform. He said his goodbyes, encouraging Emma to grow up strong, and handed Lucy a watch. It was set to 15 minutes, just enough time until dawn. Wesley stepped outside, and now fully transformed, he fought Cody. The two werewolves clashed in a brutal battle, but Wesley's strength began to overpower Cody's. In the end, he ripped Cody's head off, knowing that he too was now a monster. Back inside, Lucy hurried to hide Emma in a safe spot, but she knew Wesley in his werewolf form would soon be coming for them. As she prepared for the worst, she found a single shotgun shell on the floor and loaded it. When Wesley finally appeared at the door, Lucy pleaded with him. She grabbed a family photo, hoping to remind him of who he was. The werewolf hesitated, but then let out a howl and began to rise, the transformation almost complete. The sound of the watch beeping reminded Lucy that time was running out. She fired the shotgun at the window, letting sunlight flood the room. The first rays of dawn broke through, and Wesley, now human again, collapsed, his werewolf form fading. Lucy rushed to him, relieved but shaken. They had survived, thanks to Wesley's sacrifice and the rising sun. The battle was over, and they were finally safe. For now. And for now, you reach the end of your binge, my friend. But you can continue by clicking on the recommendations on the right next. Stay in the lounge for a bit longer. Subscribe and drop a like if you want to return for future recaps. Grab your popcorn, enjoy yourself, and see you soon, my friend.